For your Emmy consideration, HBO Max presents Hacks. Nominated for 17 Emmys, including Outstanding Comedy Series and Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series for Jean Smart. Don't miss the series critics call a triumph. All episodes now streaming on HBO Max. Welcome to In the Envelope, a podcast from Backstage, the one-stop shop for actors and creators both above and below the line. I am your host, Vinny Mancuso, Backstage senior editor and professional entertainment obsessive. I'll be your guide through every corner of the creative industry with the help of some of your favorite stars. Here you'll find intimate, in-depth talks with today's most award-worthy names in film, television, and theater. Along the way, we'll get advice on living your best creative life, relatable stories of the highest highs and lowest lows, and maybe, just maybe, a rare peek in the envelope.
How I found my discipline was just being a student of all the different types and just learning and being fascinated by holy shit, how do they come up with those jokes? I think a lot of people think, oh, you're just funny in your head and then it comes out. Mm-hmm. No, these people work so hard to craft these jokes and they work them over and over.
Welcome to In the Envelope, the Actors Podcast. I am your host, Vinny Mancuso, senior editor at Backstage, and today we are joined by an actual trailblazer, first black woman to serve as head writer of a late night show, first black woman to serve as head writer of a White House Correspondents' Dinner, Emmy-nominated creator and star of HBO's A Black Lady sketch show, which has more firsts both above and below the line that we even have time to list here. Robin Thede is joining us today on the podcast, the wonderful, hilarious Robin Thede. And if you have ever been even a little interested in the craft of comedy, specifically sketch comedy, strap in, because this is a masterclass. We dissected the hell out of that frog, and it's truly, truly wonderful. Let's get right into it. Here is Robin Thede.
Just tell me if I get too loud on this mic. That's why I usually have it backed off a little bit because I tend to be loud. But
all right. You already sound better than I would say 90% of the people.
Yeah, I'm a professional.
That's really all we ask.
And this isn't even the real mic. I got the whole booth over there.
I mean, we're not going to ask you to break out the real booth, but we'll see.
I do a lot of voiceovers. So,
yeah.
And because for my show in post, I do a lot of voiceover from home. Mm-hmm. So we set this up a couple years ago.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, God, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And you were about, 2-3 weeks away out from the Emmy nominations. So congratulations.
Voting starts today. Oh, crap.
Right now, it's happening as we speak.
Yeah.
Okay, that's exciting. Yeah, it's so exciting. Congratulations. 5 nominations for a Black Lady sketch show.
Thank you.
I don't think that people quite realize the sort of thrilling narrative that happens in that category between the fact that there's only been two nominees for the past few years. It's been SNL for 5 years in a row. We all love SNL. It's an institution, but it's almost feels like maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for the institution to be dethroned. But yeah, very exciting. Very exciting. I cannot wait for Emmy's night.
It's going to be fun. I'm just still trying to figure out what I'm going to wear.
Oh, well, we have time. I mean,
I have a little time.
Take care of the voting, and then we'll do the outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't wait to talk about a Black Lady sketch show, especially season 3. But I want to talk a little about you first, because I do research for all these things, these interviews, and it always seems like the guest, they have a specific point where they fell in love with acting or whatever. They did this, but I read interviews that you do and stuff, and it just kind of feels like you're a person who's always been creating. It's sort of baked in. You were making 16 millimeter shorts as a
Mhm.
kid. You toured with a puppeteer group for a
Yeah.
summer. You just
For
someone who's
three
always just
summers. Yeah.
wow, yeah, that's incredible. So
Yeah.
what's the genesis of that? Where did the creativity bug come from? And
It, yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of always been in me. I think the first time when I was little, I got a laugh. I was like, oh, that felt good. I'm a middle child, in a family full of people who are funnier than me, honestly. So it was like my household is very loud, very boisterous, very funny. And so I think I just came by it naturally. And then once I saw like Whoopi Goldberg and Kim Wayans and these black women doing it, I was like, oh, I didn't know we could do that for a living. I had only ever seen, largely SNL. So I didn't know that sketch was something we could do. I don't know. It's very weird how you just don't think, oh, I can do that until you see somebody who looks like you do it, which is fun. So, yeah, I think it always started really early. I don't think I ever really wanted to be anything else. And even when I went to college, my parents were like, please just don't get an acting degree. I was like, why? They're like, that's not a real degree. No shade to the actors. They just wanted me to, they're teachers. And now my mom's in politics, but they were in education my whole childhood. And so education was really important and getting a degree was really important. So I think for me, I chose the only degree where I could be on camera, which was broadcast journalism and African American
same.
studies, which was just like stuff I wanted to know about because I felt like I didn't get enough of it in school. And so I was running a sketch comedy group at Northwestern and then got scouted by Second City. And then it was kind of on from there. I came out to LA with a one woman show and started writing for Mike Epps and Kevin Hart and all these comedians and who really took me under their wing and saw something in me, not just as a writer, but as a performer too. And I think the opportunities just weren't as plentiful as they are now. So, they always mentored me and helped me writing wise, but on camera, there wasn't a lot happening. I was on a lot of canceled shows and failed pilots and that kind of stuff for years and years and years, but made my bread and butter writing for others. And by the time I got on the nightly show with Larry Wilmore, I was able to, start to really hone my own voice on camera. Thanks so much to Larry providing a space for that. And then that set the pace for me to then do my own late night show. And then when that went away, the sketch show. So yeah, it's been a long road, but it's been one that's been really, really joyful and fruitful. And I've learned so many different things at so many different stages. But I think that starts from being a kid because I never saw anything different for me. So there wasn't anything, by the time I was like, oh, I can do this for a living, it was like writing, performing, whatever. It was all kind of like, okay, well, I can just kind of make this what I want it to be. I remember I was one of the earliest clients at my first big agency in the writer performer department.
Hmm.
That was something that was like brand new.
Yeah.
And now it's literally
They're like,
everyone.
both?
Yeah, they were like,
exactly.
how can you do both? So it was like, that was always tricky. And there were, for many years, a lot of people were like, oh, isn't she just a writer? Or, oh, isn't she just a comedian? Or, oh, isn't she just an actor? There were so many people that only saw me as one thing, but no one ever saw me as one thing exclusively. It was never like, oh, people
Hmm.
only see me as a writer. It just depended on how they knew me and what they had seen me in. So now I think people see me as a showrunner and like a producer,
Yeah.
which is interesting because that was never really my goal. But in order to make the content I wanted to make, it was kind of a necessary progression. And again, like a welcome one. It's been really cool.
Absolutely. This is probably an insane question, but can you remember the first time you wrote what is a sketch? The first thing that you wrote that you're like, oh, I'm writing a sketch, or is it just like you were making these little bits of comedy and then it just evolved from there?
So my sister and I used to, when we would record these videos before YouTube was even a thing with my parents' old broken camera, We did, well, live, we used to do the Ricky Lake show. I don't know if you remember what that is, but Ricky Lake had a talk show. It was like the Jenny Jones, Jerry Springer, Ricky Lake era. It was very like salacious daytime talk shows were like all the rage.
Yeah, it was on. It was what was on when you were homesick from school, basically.
Correct. So we would, me and my cousins and my sisters would reenact Ricky Lake episodes, but like make them really, really like hilariously ridiculous. But then when we started shooting them, I don't think we shot one of those. I remember there was a documentary. This is really inappropriate, but this will kind of tell you where my humor came from. There was a documentary, I think it was on HBO, called Pimps Up, Hoes Down.
Okay.
And it was a documentary about pimps and hoes.
Yeah,
and like
it's right there in the title.
Yeah, it's right there in the title. Pretty self-explanatory. But it was like wild. It was really revolutionary for the time. And you really got insight into like what these people did, for a living. And it really humanized them in many ways. But anyway, so my ass at 13 had seen it. Don't tell my parents. And my sister and I shot a sketch called Pimps Up, Bears Down. And we got in a bear costume, and it was like pimps that were like pimping bears out for like honey. So it was like a very like sanitized version. Yeah. But they were still pimps, like, like making bears get out there on a stroll for honey. Yeah. Not for sex, just to like scare people, like do what bears do, So I remember that from early on, but all that stuff got lost in a flood.
I was going to say, it's a shame it's not,
No,
YouTube
my parents had a flood. I barely have any childhood pictures. I don't have any of those sketches from back then. They all got ruined in a flood. It was before digital conversion was our financial capability. So yeah, I don't have any of it, but I do remember that one being one of the very early ones.
I'm so glad you do, because that's incredible. And you also mentioned, one of the big hallmarks of the early parts of your career was writing jokes for other comedians. You mentioned Kevin Hart, Anthony Anderson, people like that. I'm curious what writing jokes in other people's voices taught you about your voice.
Yeah. So I learned that comedians really only do certain types of jokes, even now on the sketch show, we really only do 3 types of jokes. And we exploit those. But it sounds limiting, but it's not. We love puns, we love reversals, we love metaphors, right? So those are the ones that we find people find most relatable. It's not only those 3 types, but like if you really boil it down, most comedians only do 1 to 3 types of jokes. And that's because that's what falls in their cadence. This is very joke nerd heavy because I'm dissecting a frog. Jokes. Yeah. But like really, I mean, Richard Pryor was a storyteller. Eddie Murphy told stories through characters. Richard Pryor used character, but it was always still Richard there. Eddie disappeared into his characters, right? So, but they're storyteller comedians. And Red Fox was the same way. I mean, Moms Mabley was the queen of a reversal. Everywhere you thought she was going to go was a misdirect. Like just from the dawn of time of comedy, you can watch this. Whereas, you'll get anecdotal comedians and snarky comedians and metaphoric comedians. And I mean, there's all sorts of types. So what I did really early on was, because I was a student of comedy and I was so obsessed with it, and not just sketch, but stand-up too. And I never did stand-up. I was always a sketch and improv comedian, but I was obsessed with stand-ups and I was obsessed with the way that they wrote jokes. So I just would figure out the types of jokes that they did, and then I would write for that. And then over time, I learned what made me laugh and what my voice was. And so once I started figuring out the things I had to say, and wanted to say, and kind of just how I communicate, just in talking, let alone in jokes, then I figured out what my voice was, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And then, I'm kind of the same way, where it's so interesting to me how comedy works, but then it's like, talking about comedy almost, it's like talking about magic, and I'm curious how as someone who clearly deeply cares about comedy, what your way into the mechanics of it were, the sort of day-to-day, this is how you write a joke, how you came to find your discipline in comedy, basically.
Do I have discipline in common?
Well, something's working. Something's working out.
Yeah, no. I work really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the best comedians are naturally funny, but you can still boil down what they do to a science, right? So even though Richard Pryor would never, I don't know, I can't speak for Richard Pryor, but like even though most comedians wouldn't be able to tell you, actually, I don't think that's true. Let me say this the right way. I think most comedians, most incredible comedians, can tell you exactly the types of jokes they do and the rhythm of them and the formula that they need to tell those jokes. And they're all different. That's why they all feel different when they're on stage. What Chappelle does is very different from what Rock does, is very different from what Lunel does. You know what I mean? And they're all, they've all got their own rhythm. And I think it's like a TV show. Like when you're watching TV, you want to know what you're tuning into week to week. You don't mind surprises and new characters and that kind of stuff, but it needs to feel like the same show. And so I think comedy is the same way and writing jokes are the same way. So how I found my discipline was just being a student of all the different types and just learning and being fascinated by like, holy shit, like how do they come up with those jokes? Like, where does this come from? And it's not, I think a lot of people think, oh, you're just funny in your head and then it comes out. No, these people work so hard to craft these jokes and they work them over and over and over. If you watch, Chris Rock will be out on the road for, I don't know, a long time before he does a special. And, you know, some comedians will go out for maybe a month or two, but I've seen comedians go out for years before they do a special. Years. And it's incredible to watch. And they'll jot stuff down and they'll come back and they'll analyze every single joke. What did the crowd do with this? What did the crowd do with that? And you may have had like a bad crowd that night. And I'm like, how do you even gauge that? So I started gauging it less on audience reaction and more on my reaction. So does it make me laugh? Do I know that's a good joke, even if the audience is too stupid to get it?
Exactly, yeah.
Sorry, not too stupid, too drunk to get it.
I was gonna say, it depends.
Yeah. So the audience is never stupid. They're just usually drunk. And so, you know, that's why I also like TV better because if people watch you drunk, you don't have to hear it. You know, like, you don't have to hear the heckling. And not the heckling, but like the response, you know, it's like you just get a real reaction in real time on social media, which is fun. Although you could be drunk on social media too. But yeah, I don't know. I find it better to like honestly make myself laugh. And then I hope the audiences do. But like if I'm laughing, I feel like I did a great job because I know what's funny. And I know, and things are different things are funny to different people. But in terms of like universally funny, I know what's funny. Yeah. And because it's my trade, it's my profession. I have to know these things, right? An engineer knows how to make a rocket, hence my NASA shirt. But I don't know how to do that. But if you're like, you make me laugh, I can figure out a way to do that no matter who you are, you know?
Exactly. Funny is funny. You know, it's just
funny is funny. Funny is funny. It's the same thing. I mean, people are like, why'd you call it a Black Lady sketch show? Isn't that going to turn some people off? I'm like, if they're turned off by that title, they might be racist. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to pull a Jeff Foxworthy.
Yeah, but it's like, you might be racist. Yeah. No, but like, one of my favorite sketch shows is The Whitest Kids You Know. Like, you know what I mean? It's an ironic title, but I mean, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? You were definitely, I just didn't want people to be like, why are there no non-Black people on this show? Like, I didn't want people to be surprised when they tuned in. I wanted to get that out of the way so then we could get to the funny. You know, and I always say it's specifically written and specifically cast, but it's universally funny. It really is. And you may not get some of the cultural references, but that's part of the world we live in. I don't get every cultural reference everywhere all the time, but I still enjoy everything. So
well, it's kind of like the one of the most beautiful parts of the show is something you mentioned. Like if you're not, even if you don't get you don't get the specifics of it, you get why it's funny. You know what I mean? Like
you're still laughing. Like it's still funny to see somebody, me in a beard, or you know, doing something like not answering a question, or you know, the Coral Reefs gang talking about paternity leave while they're talking about gangbanging. You know what I mean? Like gangbanging in the terms of what a gang does, not like a weird orgy thing. And so it's too early. I haven't eaten.
Totally fine.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that's what we strive for, but we really strive for cultural authenticity as well, right? We're a Black Lady sketch show, not the Black Lady sketch show. We can't represent all Black women, but We are delivering a sort of educational service to people. Anybody who comes to watch the show, whether you're Black or not, is going to learn something culturally that you didn't know before. And I think that's really fun.
Absolutely. So I sketch comedy in particular, and correct me if I'm wrong, it just seems to attract particularly driven people. There's something about that about the sketched comedy. You hear about what SNL is like, and anecdotally, people that do sketch comedy are people who are also just have like incredible amounts of projects going at one time. What do you think it is about the medium that attracts driven people?
That's really interesting. It's hard. It's the hardest thing you can make. And I don't think people realize that. Sketch comedy is reinventing the wheel every day. So we shoot what I equate to 50 short films in 6 episodes. Between our interstitials and our sketches, it's over 50 pieces of content. And each one of them has, except the interstitials, those are usually in one place. But say we do 36, 38 sketches in a season, everyone has its own location. Everyone has its own characters. Everyone has its own narrative arc. Everyone has its own genre, style, and theme, visual aesthetic. So music score, there's nothing that can be repeated. We don't even repeat hairstyles in a season. So, and there are hundreds of characters a season. So it's really wild because I think what attracts driven people is because it's not for the faint of heart. It is so difficult every day to create a 3 to 5 minute narrative that's going to make people consistently laugh, that's going to give you characters you care about who you want to see come back, and that's going to look beautiful. And those were our goals. When I created the show, I wanted to make the most cinematic, beautiful sketch show ever. I wanted to make a narrative sketch show where Black women live grounded experiences in a magical reality, because I wanted it to be relatable, but also aspirational. And so all of those things make it incredibly difficult. Being at a different location every day, having 40 or 50 guest cast in 6 episodes, that's unheard of. It's unheard of. So, but sketch in general, no matter how you slice it, even if you are on a stage, even if you are, what SNL pulls off every week is the impossible. We do it differently because we take 9 months to make the show, and we only shoot for 3, but it's still like breakneck pace, but it takes us a year between hiring, writing, production, post, marketing, to get it on the air. But we have a much smaller crew. I have 7 writers. All the people we're ever up against in the writing categories, late night, sketch, whatever, have like 15, 25 writers. We have tiny writers. We only have a couple people in our cast. It's a small, scrappy crew. So that's why I'm really proud of it too, is not only does it take that dedication, but we do it with way less people than most. So, I think it's just, I'm so proud of our production design team, our editors, all these people of color who are getting nominated for the first time in these categories and winning. It's just really cool.
For your Emmy consideration, HBO presents Euphoria. Nominated for 16 Emmys, including Outstanding Drama Series and Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series for Zendaya. Don't miss what critics call a bold and original series. Euphoria is now streaming on HBO Max. I do want to get into the show specifically because I think talking about this show will offer an idea of what goes into sketch comedy for the people listening, because like you mentioned, I don't think people quite understand the amount of ideas that need to be generated.
Oh my God.
For the 6 episodes you guys put out.
Yeah. We write hundreds of sketches.
Yeah,
hundreds.
I can imagine.
And then we boil that down to, like I said, 36 to shoot, plus the interstitials, plus the opening credits every season, which always change. Why did I do that to myself? I don't know. But yeah, so they will change every season, and every season somebody's like, why'd you get a new one? I liked this one. I liked this one. But yeah, Black people don't like change. But I'm going to keep changing it because we're going to get used to it. But also I think people now get it. I think after first season, people were like, where are the puppets? And I'm like, they're coming back. Don't worry. But I couldn't say that, obviously, but I knew they'd be back in different ways. But yeah, I think I just want to keep it fresh. I never want to feel like we're doing the same thing every season. And, I just want people to constantly be guessing. It's why there's this through line and this narrative about what we thought was the end of the world. We now know it wasn't the end of the world. It's just a parallel world where Dr. Hadassah would be elected president for 30 seconds. So I think that's what's exciting about it, is being able to leap between all these genres and like create this product that feels varied but cohesive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
don't know if I answered your question at all.
No, I actually was going to ask about the cohesiveness of it, because something I find very interesting about this show, and especially after rewatching season 3 for this episode, it almost feels like you could watch this show like it's Westworld. Like you can like sort of.
You don't know how right you are.
Like it kind of because it's so.
Wait till season 4. You don't know.
That's very interesting. That's a scoop. That's a scoop for everybody out there.
Well, it's not really. It's going to mean nothing to anyone.
No,
I'm obsessed with shows like that. I'm obsessed with Westworld and WandaVision and Lovecraft Country and all these shows that, even Succession, like all these things inform the material, because in addition to, all of our cultural references, but they all inform it because we've been called the Black Mirror of sketch comedy, which I effing love. Like I'm obsessed. I can name any Twilight Zone ever made, any Twilight Zone episode ever made. I can tell you the entire plot. I know them backwards and forwards. Like, I'm somebody who lives on surprising the audience. And I do think that audiences are smart, especially our audience. And so, even when they're drunk. And so I think it's about constantly keeping them on their toes, but also because I want to encourage repeat viewing. I want people to watch the show over and over and over and see new jokes, see new Easter eggs, see new connections. And the end of season 3, we started to see that characters who had never met are now living in the same universe. So we created this cinematic universe where all of these characters can now interact, and I'm just thrilled to see what happens with that in future seasons.
Absolutely. So just from like a beginning standpoint, you mentioned it's sort of like an idea machine. There are ideas flying around, I assume, all of the time. How do you know, or when do you know when a premise is ready? When it's something that's like, oh, this is something we should explore?
I get a click. Like I just call it the click, and I just do this, and it makes no sense, and no one's going to see what I'm doing. But it's like the Iron Man thing. I'm like clicking in that thing in my chest. It just feels right. I go, that's it. So I know when a writer pitches an idea and it's perfect from the pitch, and I know when an idea has been reworked 25 times and we finally got it, and we've definitely done both. It's not like every idea is perfect upon its first pitch. But it's not even the premise as much as the relatability. I'm like, is there something in here that someone's going to see and go, holy shit, I know that person, or I've been there before? Because we hear premises all the time that I'm like, oh, I love that, but like it doesn't work on the show, or I can't find a way to make that make sense in our universe, or no one's going to get that. You know what I mean? But the premise is great and worthy. But we write hundreds of sketches. This is what I was saying before. We write hundreds of sketches before we get down to those final that we shoot, the final like 36, 38 that we shoot.
And so,
and then I cut some in post too. Some of those don't even air.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, like, what is the next step past that? When you get a premise and it has that relatability factor and it feels right for the show.
Yeah.
How do you then drill down? How does that?
So the writers know we all have to come with beginning, middle, twist, and end. And we're not focusing so much so on the hard twist, because I mean, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But I don't want, like I said, I'd never want to do the same thing every season. So I want you to feel like you're still watching the same show, but that we're evolving. So I've started to focus more recently less on the hard twists and more on backstories and moving stories forward and giving characters more dimensionality. It's really important to me that these characters are not one note, that there's no like straight man characters where they're like just the foil for somebody who's ridiculous. I think everybody should be funny. So we work on all those. Like, I think the writers are always surprised when they come to the show their first season. They're like, oh, there's so many rules. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of rules, because it needs to, without those rules, it wouldn't feel like our show, And so we've developed a Bible, and there are certain things that the writers need to do in order for it to make it, into production. So, yeah, there are next steps. And without getting into too much of the secret sauce,
Yeah, we'll
the biggest,
keep the secret.
yeah, but the biggest thing is that it needs to have a full narrative. It needs to have characters who can come back. So characters we're invested in, so they're not one note. You've got to give them a life off the page. And our actors, credit to them because, I mean, I guess us, but we all add so much to the characters, even beyond what the brilliant writers have already put on the page.
Mm-hmm. Is there
It's a team effort.
Yeah, I think that's another thing about sketch is, it people know that movies are a team effort. People know that films and television are a team effort. But like you mentioned, this is like 5 individual short films that are being shot and cinematically, lit and the color and the costuming, the set design. I think that's
the hair.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. I'm curious how often you find that twist on the day. Like how often a sketch, it really finds that last over the hurdle while you're filming it, or is it
Never.
Very meticulously plotted?
Meticulously written.
Yeah.
Over and over and over. No, we would never orchestrate plot or arc on set, ever. No, because we want to know where we're going. And I think your best improv situations are where everyone knows the stakes and everyone knows where we need to go, but you may change the path to get there to keep you on your toes, and that's okay. But the character games have to be very clearly defined, and the plot and the arc and the beginning, middle, twist, and end, all that narrative. No, I'm too much of a writer to let that happen on set.
I love that.
And I'm not saying it hasn't changed on set. That's happened very rarely. I can probably only name 2 sketches where that's happened, but those were magical days where it was just like, oh, we got to go to this place. And actually, you know what? I take that back. The ending never changed. The ending's never changed. It's never changed because I think the hardest thing, and one of the things, this is like the 7th sketch show I've done. The first one I created, but I've written and performed on 6 before this at least. And then plus live shows for 20 plus years. So I learned very early on that the end of a sketch is the hardest part. If you can dismount in a way that leaves them laughing and doesn't overstay your welcome, you've done your job. And Conan O'Brien told me once, he said, when I met him the first time, he said something like, I'm paraphrasing, he said, I hate you. Like when he first walked up to me, and I go, thank you so much.
Wow.
and he was like, I hate you because I watched 3 sketches in a row just randomly, and every one of them hit. And he said, I've never had that much success. And I was like, yeah, right. Literally one of the most prolific comedy writers of our time. But it was funny that he said that, though. But that is the holy grail for those of us who do sketch. It's like, if you can have 3 hit in a row, you've won. And I try on this show to have every sketch hit, and like every sketch won't be for everybody. But if you have more that hit for people than don't, you're winning.
Yeah.
They all hit for me, obviously. But, I think we have a really high success rate with our sketches.
Average is pretty high.
Yeah. So that's a huge medal of honor for anybody who makes sketch, for sure.
I do want to ask.
You can make one funny sketch, but if you can make hundreds of funny sketches, that's a big deal.
I was just like, literally right before this, I was like, oh, let me watch one more, just to get a sense of it. And it was What Up, I'm 3, which has, it just, that button at the end is just, it like propels you forward. And I
that's
think
a big twist. It's a big twist, but I don't know if it's unexpected. Did you believe she was a child?
I didn't know what to believe because I never know what to believe watching this show. I don't like to get too comfortable in any of your sketches because.
Oh, yeah, that would be a mistake. Yeah, never get comfortable in these sketches because we will pull the rug out. That's for sure.
I love that. I do want to ask more about, some specific sketches because I think, knowing knowing how they were conceived, how they were written, how they were shot, directed, I think.
Well, What Up, I'm 3, the writers laughed in my face and were like, don't do this.
Well, how often I'm curious, I'm curious what the pitch process is like for sketch comedy in the sense that, I wake up every day and I don't want people to not laugh. I don't want the feeling of someone not laughing at my jokes, but that is your entire sort of that's the bravery that comes with being a comedian is here's an idea I have. Do you think it works? I'm curious what that's like for you, bringing something to the table and you think it's funny and you believe it's funny, but
Oh
what,
man, my writers will let me know.
yeah, that's kind of it's what that
Yeah,
team
if I
effort
bring
is like.
something. Well, What Up I'm 3 was that. So in season 2, I pitched it
Mm-hmm.
and I started doing, so it was based on this story of this girl who had done this in the UK, and the people abandoned her because she tried to like kill them. But they saw her get her period. They thought she was like 6 and she got her period and then tried to like kill the husband and like blackmail the family. And then they abandoned her and they went to jail
Jesus.
for child endangerment. I was like, she's not a child.
Yeah.
It's a crazy story. So I was like, oh my God, what if we, do something like this? So originally I had written this very dystopian version of it where it was in the future in this weird orphanage in this family, like a place where children no longer existed. And so she was like, no, I'm 3. She was like, what up, I'm 3. She always said, what up, I'm 3 like that.
The core, yeah.
But it was this weird steampunk version of the dystopian future orphanage. And they were all like, what is this? This is terrible. So I scrapped it in season 2 and I rewrote it in season 3. And I just trusted my gut and simplified it and streamlined it. And then, so we do internal auditions amongst the cast to see who's going to play each role. We knew I was playing that role, but we didn't know who was going to play Jerry, the one that Gabrielle Dennis plays. And so Gabrielle Dennis she interpreted that character so differently than what was on the page that I rewrote the sketch and gave her 50 times more jokes because it was, she just became the focal point. The focal point of that sketch is not really me. It's really the people around and who's believing it's a child and who isn't. And then Ashley with Harlan just being like, leave me out of this, like just being this harangued wife of this woman. And then this poor Sky's character who just desperately wants a child, And so that's what I think we do really well on this show, especially in season 3, is give everyone a very clear purpose. And you can watch a sketch only watching one character each time you watch it, and you'll get a new experience, So that's what I loved about that. And once I knew that sketch finally clicked in season 3. And even then, I think the writers were still like, you're crazy, But then when we read it at the table read, everybody was like, okay. And then, once we got, I also had the vision. I knew what she would look like, right? But no one else did. So once I stepped on set, people were like, okay, got it. This is crazy and good, that. So yeah, I think there's an evolution. There's some things that we know, like Basic Ball, the Patti LaBelle sketch On My Own. Like when those things were pitched by Ashley Nicole Black first season, it was like, oh, stop pitching, go right. Like those were amazing,
Yeah.
Or like when, I'm trying to think one of my, or when Holly Walker pitched The Last Supper, which turned into The Resurrection in season 3.
The second thing on my list, I was like,
oh my God.
Because
it's one of my favorite sketches.
I was raised in Catholic school and, it's just, it just hits.
It does. It just hits.
Yeah.
But even if you are atheist and have never read the Bible, you can still understand the righteous indignation of 3 women who couldn't sit at the big table and are at the kiddie table at the Last Supper, and then with the resurrection, same thing. They got bad seats. Their friend hooked them up to a concert. They got bad seats, there's a universal relatability and vibe underneath all of them. But yeah, it's like those things you just know. Like when Holly pitched The Last Supper, I was like, holy crap, what a great idea, and just super relatable. I think as Black people, we all grew up sitting at a kiddie table in our grandmother's house on Thanksgiving. But I think that's not even actually totally a Black thing. I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that. But yeah, so we definitely, sometimes you know right away and sometimes you just kind of keep working it. The sketch Equally Joked with Wanda Sykes and David Allen Greer, it was always funny, but the jokes weren't right. The premise was always right, but the jokes weren't right. And we were like, we cannot give this to Wanda Sykes and David Allen Greer without professional level jokes, So we rewrote that dozens of times. Dozens. Like the writers were like, I hate this sketch. I'm so over it. But what it ended up being was amazing. It was really fun and really, Wanda was so great and Dag was so great. And we were just able to create something that felt really unique, that we hadn't done on the show before. The process is not the same for every sketch. What were the other ones on your list? I'm curious.
Let's see. We got The Resurrection. We have Didn't Figures, which is just
Yeah.
which is again is one of those things where it's so meticulously crafted. Like it's such a like it's so it you keep using the word and I keep seeing the word cinematic. It's such a cinematic thing, but it's also just so funny. Like it's just I don't know. It's these are the sketches that I think are just they're universal because of the way they come together. Snitches get cross stitches.
Yes.
Also in there.
Yes.
And that's that's another thing that I wanted to ask about is there's that sort of weird horror turn there that this show gets into a lot. Which is interesting. They often bounce back from horror to absurdism and back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful the way you balance it. That's not a question, but it's it's a statement.
I'll take it.
Incredible. Well, I can let you go soon, but I do want to ask you something we ask a lot of people after sort of looking back on their projects and their career, and that's if you have any advice that you would give to your younger self, if you could.
It's interesting because as I was going through this business, it took me longer on paper, if you think about it, than a lot of people to be where I am, I guess. But the business was a different place. And there weren't a lot of Black people on TV when I got here.
Mm-hmm.
And the Black people that were on TV were on UPN and CW, and all those shows were getting canceled. Like, that's where I came into this business. And so I just spent a lot of years behind the scenes writing for others, but still performing live, but not on television as much visibly for people to see. So I guess I would tell myself, I would say be patient, but I was always enjoying what I was doing. And even when I had no money, like I never was like, I'm not supposed to be here. I always felt I was meant to do this and that it would happen in time. And I kind of knew early on that it would take me a while. I don't know why. It's not that I wasn't ready. I just always felt like, I'll have a long career versus like a quick success and then a fade out. I was like, I'll take a long career. And so I think maybe subconsciously I did hide behind writing for others for a while because of that. I was still always auditioning and stuff, but that never worked for me, So I don't know, what would I tell my younger self? Maybe I would just explain to her a little bit more about the business. It took me a while to kind of understand like how things worked, but to be honest, I wouldn't tell her shit. She made all the right decisions. She got me here.
And
I never really struggled with confidence, so I wouldn't tell her anything like, you're great. I already knew that. Like,
I think that's my favorite answer that we've ever gotten to that question. I wouldn't tell her shit.
I wouldn't tell her shit. She's good. She got me here. She was great. She did everything right.
I couldn't possibly ask another question after that. That's wonderful. Robin, thank you so much for being here. I was so excited to have you on.
This was lovely.
Of course. And we'll be watching Emmy night, and we'll be watching into season 4 and beyond. Everything you do. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, as always, to our brilliant producer, Jamie Muffett, and to the whole team at Backstage, Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course, Casey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage with code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. 100% free, you simply cannot beat that. For more exclusive content, find us on Facebook and Twitter at In the Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who should we interview next? Let us know. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another peek in the envelope.